She is tolerating him too, right? Oh my gosh, she is tolerating his tolerance. Hello everyone, on my channel I analyze song lyrics very in depth through the lens of literary analysis. Today's song was requested by a viewer, so thank you so much. Today we are analyzing the song Tolerate It by Taylor Swift. As a quick disclaimer, everything presented in this video is my own personal opinion. I'm not saying that this is the interpretation. It is simply an interpretation. As always, I encourage you all to comment down below what your thoughts are. I really think that words matter. For that reason, on my channel, I tend to concentrate on diction, which is word choice, and connotation, which can be thought of as like the vibes or the emotions that the words elicit. I will be making my way through every single song on Evermore and every single song on Folklore. I do have playlists of the songs I've done so far, and I will link both playlists down below. If there are any songs you want me to do sooner, go ahead and leave that below in a comment. It's been really interesting going through Folklore songs and Evermore songs because, as Taylor has mentioned, a lot of these plot lines are fictional, inspired by things outside of her personal life. Taylor has mentioned that this is inspired by the book Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Taylor talked about being inspired by the book Rebecca in her Apple Music interview with Zane Lowe. At the time of recording this, I was able to find the interview on YouTube, so I'll go ahead and link that down below. She said, quote, "When I was reading Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and I was thinking, wow, her husband just tolerates her. She's doing all these things and she's trying so hard and she's trying to impress him. He's just tolerating her the whole time." There was a part of me that was relating to that because at some point in my life, I felt that way. So I ended up writing this song, Tolerate It. That's all about trying to love someone who's ambivalent. When you look up the word ambivalent, it means having two opposing feelings at the same time or being uncertain about how you feel. We're going to talk about this more as we get into the song, but I really feel like the husband in this song is really indifferent. He's not really showing any sort of emotion. He's not outright saying that he doesn't want to be with his wife, that he hates her, but he's not saying that he loves her either. There's definitely some internal conflict on his end. He may very well be at war with two opposing feelings. It's definitely very hurtful to the protagonist of this song. Rebecca is a 1938 Gothic novel by English author Dame Daphne du Maurier. It's about an unnamed young woman who marries a wealthy widower and then discovers that he and his household are haunted by the memory of his late first wife, the title character. So the name Rebecca refers to the widow's wife who passed away. This is a bestseller and it's never gone out of print. It has been made into a movie more than once. In 1940, the film Rebecca was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It was very successful when it came out, and it got 11 nominations at the Academy Awards, and it actually won the Academy Award for Best Picture. This film is a really big deal culturally. In 2018, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress because it was, quote, culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. The movie was remade recently in 2020, so it is still culturally relevant. The book Rebecca does deal with ghosts and a sort of haunting from the past. I don't see that notion being represented in the song as much. I think she mostly drew inspiration from the fact that the husband was just very ambivalent towards the wife. I haven't read Rebecca, but if you have and you see more similarities between that narrative and this song, please leave it in a comment below. I'd be really interested to get your perspective. So that's a little bit of background about Taylor's inspiration with this song. I don't ever look at other theories about the songs that I analyze. I try my best to steer clear from them, but sometimes I do look up what the songwriter or the singer has said about the song for some additional context. So it was really interesting to get some insight into her inspiration behind this song. So when we think about the word tolerate, initially I don't view it as super negative. I definitely don't view it as super positive. I associate the feeling of neutrality with the word tolerate. Let's look it up. If you watch my videos, you know that I love a good dictionary moment. So tolerate means to allow the existence, occurrence, or practice of something without interference. It can also mean to accept or endure, to be capable of continued subjection to, without adverse reaction. This word really does depend on the context. Sometimes when you tolerate something, it means you can withstand it, so it can be positive in that regard. However, when you are talking about a person that you're tolerating or a relationship that you're tolerating, it becomes very different, especially when that relationship is as intimate as being someone's spouse. What gets me about this song is how self-aware the protagonist is. Protagonist just means the main character. She knows that she's being tolerated. She mentions it over and over again. The fact that you are aware that you're being tolerated is heartbreaking. When someone feels like that, I would argue they feel small, belittled, they feel less than. Power dynamic wise, the protagonist feels like she has less power here because it's like a lack of respect when you feel like you're tolerated. It feels like you're annoying and you're not meant to be there. When you are forced to stay in a situation where you feel like you're not appreciated, where you feel like you're not wanted, it is horrible. The connotation of this song title is very sad. It feels gritty to me, like you're just tolerating it or just getting through it. And that grittiness in the context of a relationship is very opposing, because ideally you want a relationship to feel like soft and calm. You want it to have a stable foundation, but you want the emotions to flow and be like all rose-colored and cute. But when you have like a gritty word like tolerate, it goes in opposition to what you would want a romantic relationship to be like ideally. So there is an unbalance here, and it's very heartbreaking. And I'm gonna mention this more throughout the song, but when you tolerate something for long enough and you can't escape it, it can potentially get to a point where it just explodes. If you're building up a lot of pressure in like a sealed container, if the pressure becomes too high, the lid's gonna pop off and there could be an explosion, right? The same thing can happen emotionally or psychologically if you're under pressure so much. I sit and watch you reading with your head low. I wake and watch you breathing with your eyes closed. I sit and watch you and notice everything you do or don't do. You're so much older and wiser. And I. One thing I want to note is that when you listen to the song, every time she says "and I," it kind of trails off, like she's getting lost in thoughts. It really mirrors the emotions she's feeling and just being lost in her own thoughts and emotions, trying to figure out how to proceed. What sticks out to me in this verse, and honestly in this whole song, is the constant use of the word I. It's all in first person. This to me really aligns the protagonist with what is being stated. When something is from a third party perspective, there's more distance between it, but when it's like first person, like I saw this, I feel this, there is no doubt about it because they're literally telling you like this is how I feel. There's less room for interpretation because they're directly making a statement. There's a lot of precision in this song. She is stating things very meticulously. And this to me also connotes a feeling of anxiety. When you are forced to be that precise about your observations, I'm sure you feel anxious because the reason you are so precise is because you don't have answers. You start over-analyzing everything in hopes to gain some clarity. That's heartbreaking to me because I feel like she had to go to that length to be able to try to dissect what is going on in her marriage. It's like she's walking on eggshells constantly. I sit and watch you reading with your head low. I wake and watch you breathing with your eyes closed. So she is constantly observing him while he is not paying attention to her. If we were to visualize this, there is like a barrier between them. He is reading, so he's immersed in a world of his own. That's what you do when you read. She is observing him. She's like a third party observer in her own home. When he's sleeping, he's in his dream world, his dreamscape. She is watching him. There's a barrier. They are on two different planes of reality. In this song, they're never existing in the same world. It's like she's on the outside looking in constantly. I think you can tell a lot about a person just by how they react to like reading or listening to music or watching movies because they're consuming art. And I would argue art touches your soul, right? I think she's really trying to understand his essence, like who he is as a person. He probably feels like a stranger to her. And also when you read and consume art, very hard to keep a poker face. When you go into the world, oftentimes you have a poker face. That's just the way it is. But when you're like immersed in something, your true nature often comes out. So I think she's trying to like figure out what his true nature is, because when you're reading, you're immersed in the book, so you're not like too worried about like not showing emotion or just being super cool, right? You're just reacting naturally. For me, when she's watching him reading, I think she's trying to read him. Like her book is him. because she needs to like figure out what's going on. These two situations that she's observing him in are situations where he's just existing as he is. He's not like putting on a show. I sit and watch you. The fact that she's sitting and watching him shows us that she's very concentrated on this activity. To me, this just shows how desperate she is to try to figure him out and notice everything you do or don't do. Again, this to me is very reflective of an unhealthy relationship dynamic. When you have to be that meticulous about what someone is doing and not doing, and you're kind of keeping notes and tabs on that, it means that you're not feeling safe and secure in that relationship, which we know she's not, so this makes sense. The fact that she seems so aware, it's both good and sad. They say ignorance is bliss for a reason. She knows the reality of what's going on, and I'm sure that's very hurtful to her. However, when you're aware of something, you have more power because you can decide to make a change. So she's very much attuned to him, but I would argue he's pretty much oblivious to her existence. They're so much older and wiser, and there could literally be a big age gap between the protagonist and her spouse. In the book Rebecca, there is an age gap. Another way to consider it is that she just feels like a kid around him. Sometimes some people talk down to you, even if you're the same age, even if you're older than them. Some people just talk down to you. They don't respect you, and you feel small in their presence. So that could be the dynamic she's referring to. When there's an adult and a kid, the adult always has greater power. She feels like a child in this relationship. She doesn't feel like she has any footing here. This first verse really sets the context. It lets us know what the power dynamic is like. It lets us know how the protagonist views herself. And we also know that she's desperate for some clarity in her relationship. She's trying to grasp some clarity, right? She's just like trying to get some answers, but there's nothing to grasp onto. I wait by the door like I'm just a kid. Use my best colors for your portrait. Lay the table with the fancy crap and watch you tolerate it. If it's all in my head, tell me now. Tell me I've got it wrong somehow. I know my love should be celebrated, but you tolerate it. This makes it seem like she's a housewife. She's taking care of the home, which is a very difficult thing to do. Imagine her getting everything ready for when he gets home from work and wanting to present it to him. I get the feeling that he probably doesn't care. The fact that she's waiting by the door to me suggests that she centers her whole life around her spouse. I would argue that she doesn't have anything going on for herself, because if she did, she would be just like in her room, like doing her thing, or like in the garden gardening. But no, she's waiting for him by the door. Like when you wait for someone by the door, you're really waiting for them, right? Perhaps the protagonist is doing what she thinks she's supposed to do as a wife, just fulfilling her wifely duties. But it's very sad because she's centering her whole world around this person, and this person doesn't seem to care. When I hear that she's waiting by the door for him, I get the picture of like a dog like waiting by the door and just being like this. That's very cute, but that's something like a dog does. If you imagine a person doing the same thing, like going by the door and just like sitting down like this, waiting for someone to get home, that would be heartbreaking to witness. It's showing that there is a lack of respect here. The spouse doesn't respect her, I know that already. She's also unknowingly not respecting herself. As an outsider looking in, I can tell that she's giving too much of herself away. When you visualize it, her just like waiting by the door for this person, I just want to be like, girl, go like do something in your room, like go for a walk, like don't wait for him by the door, because he doesn't appreciate it. If he did appreciate it and you want to do it, like that's great, but when he walks in that door, I'm pretty sure he's gonna look at her with like a side eye and with a lot of contempt and not really view her as a human being. That's the vibe I get from her spouse. Like he's not interested, like he literally doesn't care about her. And of course this line could just be purely metaphorical, illustrate the power dynamic. Regardless, I think it is very sad, and I definitely want the protagonist to just be like, no, I am not waiting for you at the door. I am gonna sit on the couch, or I am gonna go out and not even tell you where I'm going, right? Use my best colors for your portrait. She really respects him and she really values him. When you draw a portrait of someone, you are really concentrated on that person because you are looking at their features with great specificity. You want to get it right. I'm assuming that's how you would draw a portrait. You have to like stare at that person a lot and just be like, oh no, their nose is like this. Oh, their hair has highlights. Let me just like color that in. So you have to be very attuned to their existence and you have to be very observant about them. And she's using her best colors for this. This whole metaphor, drawing a portrait of him, to me is very significant. When you're actually physically painting it, It's a much more labor intensive process. So she's really giving her all to this relationship. She's using her best colors, right? She's not like BSing her way through this. She's putting in a lot of effort somewhere where it's not being appreciated. You know how like some people say the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference? When you hate someone, there's an emotion there. You're triggered by something. It seems like he's just indifferent. And when someone's indifferent, it like messes with you. I don't think he's ever been like, oh, I don't like you to his wife. I think he just is super neutral and just has no opinion about her. I would argue that that's worse, because if he explicitly said to her, oh, I don't like you, I don't want to be in this relationship, that's very heartbreaking, but she could be like, okay, he doesn't want me. But when you don't have answers for something, like she probably just feels crazy. She even asks that later in the song, like, tell me if it's all in my head. Really do get the sense that he is withholding that piece of information from her. We can think about this in a more dramatic sense. Pretend that the protagonist of the song is sick. Her husband has 2 medications, one that will heal her and one that will like kill her. This is like a very intense example, but like I randomly thought of it, so let's go with it. So he has like 2 pills. Is this like the Matrix? I don't know, I never watched the whole thing. In this relationship dynamic, he is not giving her the pill that will heal her. He's like, no, I don't care. He's also not giving her the pill that will kill her. Again, this is all metaphorical. We'd be killing her emotionally. He's not giving this to her either. He's just standing above her, watching her suffer and allowing it. To state it dramatically, that's what he's doing. He is just allowing her to exist in a sphere of suffering. I say the word sphere on purpose because she's literally living in a bubble when her whole world is based on one person, where you go to the door waiting for them. That's the only thing you have in your life. She's literally living the entirety of a life in one small bubble. We don't know what the husband is like. We don't know like what his deal is, if he's going through anything. Of course, there's 2 sides to every story. However, we are being presented with a protagonist's side, and regardless of, you know, his backstory, we can say with certainty that this dynamic is not healthy. Lay the table with the fancy crap. Taylor does not use the word crap. I don't mind it when she curses in songs. In fact, I think it humanizes her and it really expresses what she wants to express with more passion. She's doing her wifely duties. She's doing what she's supposed to do, but she doesn't care about it. That's why she uses the word crap. She is only doing that because it's what's expected of her and because she wants to make her husband happy and watch you tolerate it. Instead of the husband being appreciative of what she's doing, he's tolerating it. He's not being like, this is ridiculous. Why are we doing this? Why are you doing this? I don't care about this. And he's not even putting on a show and being like, oh, this is great. Thank you so much for doing this. This must have taken a lot of time and energy. I appreciate you doing this for our home. He just is like, very good, and walks along. If it's all in my head, tell me now. Tell me I've got it wrong somehow. She is second guessing herself. She's like on a tightrope emotionally. She's not falling, but she's not stable on the tightrope. She's just like in a constant state of losing her balance. If she had answers, she could either gain her balance and walk on that tightrope, I guess this is a tightrope, and walk on the tightrope, or she can just fall off. But she's doing neither. I know my love should be celebrated, but you tolerate it. I'm glad that she's aware that she's not being treated like she should. It sounds like she does know her worth. Says, I know that my love should be celebrated. She is aware of the dynamic here. I think she is just looking for confirmation. I greet you with a battle, heroes. Welcome. I take your indiscretions, all in good fun. I sit and listen. I polish plates until they gleam and glisten. You're so much older and wiser, and every time he walks in the door, she is pretty much kissing his feet, right? Someone is coming back from war and they were a hero during the war. That's a very profound thing. A battle hero definitely deserves a welcome of that sort. I don't think that her spouse is doing anything that would warrant that type of welcome, but she's still giving it to him. She's literally doing the most and he is literally doing nothing. Not even doing the least, he's like doing like negative. Have you seen the memes where it's about relationships? It's like, oh, I gave you everything. I sacrificed this for you. I did that for you. And then the other person's like, I never asked you to. That's the dynamic here. She's doing the most and he's just like, he doesn't care. He just doesn't want to be there. Maybe they got married out of duty. Maybe he loved her at one point and his feelings have changed. Or maybe it's just I don't know, maybe the society they're in or the time period that this is taking place in, you just have to get married, and it just so happened to be to each other. I take your indiscretions all in good fun. And indiscretion is doing something that you know you're not supposed to do, employing bad judgment in your decision making. I don't know if he's like legit cheating on her or if he's just going out doing things that she would prefer him not to do. She's aware of what he's doing, but she's not being mean about it. She's letting him be. I really get the sense that the air around them feels heavy. They both kind of feel suffocated by this relationship, but in different ways. I think this is referring to her sitting and listening to whatever he has to say, or if he wants her to do anything. She's very much like being very prim and proper, like yes, like hands folded like this, like okay, honey, yes, I'll do this, like yeah, just like Stepford Wivesy kind of. I talked about that movie a little bit in my lyric analysis of the song Buzzcut Season by Lorde. I get that vibe. She's very much wanting to be like a good wife, not really being a person, I guess. She's just trying to fit a role. If you want to play devil's advocate for a moment, in my videos, I do try to provide different avenues of thought for you guys to take that with you and then come to your own conclusions. So that's why sometimes I do present opposing viewpoints. But if you wanted to view it a little bit from his perspective, maybe he just is a person who feels suffocated by the societal pressures, and maybe he did love her at one point. I don't really know, maybe he didn't, but maybe he did, and that was before they got married. And when they got married, they had to fit into these roles, and she takes that very seriously because of societal pressure. He just doesn't like that because there's no like emotion in that. There's no like free-spiritedness in that. So you could argue that could be what is causing him to feel distant, but if you truly love someone, you should be able to communicate those feelings to them and not leave them like walking a tightrope in a continual feeling of free falling. I also wonder if she's ever expressed her concerns to him, because when she says, if it's all in my head, tell me now, I think she's literally thinking that to herself. I don't think she's asking him. Perhaps she feels it's not appropriate to bring it up. I don't know, what are your thoughts about this? Let me know down below in the comments. I polish plates until they gleam and glisten. I kind of feel like she's like a robot doing what she needs to do. I feel really bad for her. She's making the house beautiful. There's like metaphorical sparkles on these plates. The words gleam and glisten really give me a feeling of like being very precise and just very like intent on making things like be beautiful for him, because if they're literally gleaming and glistening, you've really like worked hard to make them clean, right? You're like really scrubbing it hard and polishing it very like intently. She really wants to be a good wife for him, and he just literally doesn't care. You're so much older and wiser, and there's repetition of that lyric. I say this in all of my lyric analysis videos, that repetition signifies significance. I truly believe that when words or phrases are repeated, that it's very important. It's the artist giving us a message. This to me just reinforces the relationship dynamic and the way in which the protagonist is viewing herself. She views herself as a kid. When you feel like a kid, you feel naive, you feel like you don't know what's going on, and you feel like you have to look to someone else for answers. It's a very belittling way to feel, especially in the context of a marriage. Ideally in a marriage, you would want to feel equal, right? Even if there's an age difference, I feel like you should still feel like you're equals as human beings. So that to me is just reinforcing this not so great dynamic that our protagonist has found herself in. Then we have repetition of the chorus. Now we're at the bridge. In true Taylor Swift fashion, this gets more dramatic at the bridge. I always love Taylor's bridges because they're always the thesis statement for the song. While you were out building other worlds, where was I? Where's that man who threw blankets over my barbed wire? I made you my temple, my mural, my sky. Now I'm begging for footprints in the story of your life, drawing hearts in the byline, always taking up too much space or time. You assume I'm fine, but what would you do if While you were out building other worlds, where was I? This to me is interesting because I really did feel like they were existing in two separate worlds. In the first verse, the spouse was reading, so he was in that fictional world or non-fictional world, whatever. He was in the world of books, she was in reality. And then when he was sleeping, he was in his dream world and she was in reality. So they were existing in different worlds at the beginning of the song. And now we are seeing that he had created other worlds. The word building is very significant in my opinion. When you were building something, it takes effort and concentration, and there is an intent there. You have to plan it out or map it out. It takes forethought. When you build something too, it's not like super fast. It usually does take some time And during that time, you can reflect on what you're building and figure out what way you want to finish building that thing. So he is capable of building worlds, building something for himself in life. She just was not included in any of this. I think she feels more like a housekeeper than his wife at this point. It's just very heartbreaking. She's like, where was I when you were building your life? Ideally, in a marriage or any sort of relationship, you would want to build your lives together, discuss future plans together. She was excluded from that conversation. And a world is a very vast thing, right? Taylor has talked about like creating kingdoms out of relationships before. I talked about this when I analyzed the song King of My Heart, my very first video on this channel, and also in Exile. I will link those videos down below. I really enjoy it when she makes relationships out to be kingdoms, because a kingdom is a very vast thing. However, the world is more vast than a kingdom, right? A world is like a planet, pretty much. If you want to think about it scientifically, a world consists of everything, right? So he created this vast and significant thing without her. And when you love someone and respect them, you would want to invite them into your world, and you would want to create like a world with them, right? This again is illustrating the dynamic in the relationship, as if we already couldn't tell, right? Whereas the man who'd throw blankets over my barbed wire, that line to me suggests that he wasn't like this at the beginning of their relationship. Something changed. You can sit here and speculate what has changed, but there's really no way to know for sure. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are down below. It's interesting to me though that he said he threw blankets over her barbed wire. So barbed wire is very strong. I talked about this in another one of my lyric analysis videos. I can't remember which one it was, but it was very intense because barbed wire is very strong.
Barbed wire is a type of steel fencing. It's pretty strong and it can cause injuries if someone tries to get over it. A person or animal trying to pass through or over barbed wire will suffer discomfort and possibly injury, especially if the fence is electric. It's used in agriculture for fencing in cattle. It's also used in warfare and law enforcement. Something interesting I noticed is that it says barbed wire can be bypassed with protection such as thick carpet, like a blanket, like putting blanket over a barbed wire, which is the lyric in this song. So barbed wires are not easy to bypass without injury. You often need something extra with you, like a thick carpet or a blanket. In this song, the spouse had that extra thing. They had the ability to push past the boundaries the protagonist had set up for herself. So they had a special connection at one point, and he understood her enough to be able to access that part of her.
Barbed wires often have spikes on them. They're meant to keep trespassers out. To me, this is a very interesting line because when you throw blankets over barbed wire, that means that you can get over it quickly. Oh my gosh, wait, okay. I was interpreting it more generally, but now I'm interpreting it more intimately. You know when sometimes people are closed off, you refer to that as them putting walls up to keep people away, kind of like a protective mechanism. I feel like she did that, but for her, she had barbed wires to keep people out, to keep a distance so she could keep herself safe. He was able to soften her a little bit and to really access the more intimate parts of her, like emotionally or mentally or even like spiritually perhaps. He figured out a strategy to get to know her in that manner, and not everyone can figure that out. Not everyone may think of throwing a blanket over the barbed wire. So this to me is very significant because it suggests that there was a great depth to their relationship earlier. This is why she probably feels so like, because it seems like he did a complete 180. At this point in their marriage, he has his own barbed wires and she can't throw blankets on his. He's not letting her. And I'm pretty sure his are like electric barbed wires because there's so much distance between them. That's a very heartbreaking image, but I love how Taylor incorporated that. The more you think about it, the more you're just like, oh my god, this is so sad.
There's another way to interpret this, and in my opinion, it's more heartbreaking, and I'll tell you why. She could be saying that she has barbed wires within herself. Like she has her own like personal issues, whether they're like self-esteem issues or, if we want to get very direct, maybe past traumas, things of that nature, and she was hurting herself unintentionally. He was able to put blankets over her barbed wires so she wouldn't be hurting herself as much. So he was able to help her heal in a way, or just to help her kind of go through life in a way that wasn't as difficult. This is similar to the dynamic I discussed in the song Cardigan by Taylor Swift. Again, I will link all of these videos down below for you. In Cardigan, the protagonist depended on her love interest to feel like a person, to feel seen, because she felt like an old cardigan, a forgotten item, but her partner made her feel like a favorite. So she was dependent upon her partner to feel like an actual human being that existed. In Cardigan, I discussed very in depth how she had self-esteem issues and how she became too dependent on him, and that's why she suffered so much after he cheated on her. Cardigan had a lot of very heartbreaking metaphors. It really showed the depth to which that protagonist was dependent on her partner. If we want to interpret the barbed wires as just being her own personal traumas and issues, it's much more heartbreaking because he was able to help pacify her in a way. And now he's no longer being able to do that. He's actually causing more pain, which is exactly what happened in Cardigan. If you remember in Cardigan, that love interest drew stars around her scars, but then she was bleeding afterwards. And I argue that the scars were deeper and she would have been better off without him. So I do see a parallel between these two songs just in terms of the dynamics. I do not think that they're about the same couple. I don't know which way I want to interpret it. I think that both barbed wire interpretations I'm discussing are valid, but this one to me is definitely more somber and shows that there was an even greater depth of intimacy. I'm really interested to know what your take is on this. Please let me know in a comment down below.
To my temple, my mural, my sky. To express emotions, Taylor sometimes uses 3 words and they get more intense. A temple is a place of worship, so she worshipped him in a way. She really respected him. And also when you're worshiping someone, like power dynamic wise, they're like literally a god to you, so obviously they're gonna be higher up power dynamic wise. She really viewed herself as lower than him. A temple is a place of worship. The fact that he's being represented by a setting is interesting because she's not saying I made you my god. She's saying I made you my temple. And a temple is a setting, so he was like her safe space in a way. That's one way to interpret it. Perhaps he was a safe space to her where she could feel at ease and feel comfort. She made him her temple. The word made is very important. Some things just happen without you trying, but when you make something, there's effort there. And she had barbed wire associated with her like emotionally. So I feel like she was a person that had her guard up, like a lot of people do, and she made the effort to make him her safe space. A mural is a painting that's very large.
A mural is a painting or other work of art executed directly on a wall. I want to drive the point home that murals are on walls, so let's look at the second definition. A mural is of, like, or relating to a wall. This is pretty much saying that a mural is synonymous with a wall. For me, this is significant because walls are a part of a sound structure. They hold up a house, right? And also, when something takes up the entirety of a wall, you can't ignore it. Even if you want to look the other way, if you pass it by, you're gonna get a glimpse of it from the corner of your eye. So the fact that her spouse was her mural is very significant because he took up a very significant space in this metaphorical house, and it's something that she can't ignore. And she says my mural. She's taking ownership of the mural, of this very vast and I'd say extravagant piece of art. Mural is art, right? And like I mentioned earlier, art touches the soul. So she had a very deep and intimate connection with him. I don't know if it goes both ways. I kind of think it did go both ways at the beginning, but for some reason he lost touch with that dynamic and she is still very much in it.
Maybe in her internal landscape, in her internal home, he took up the entirety of a wall. So he was a huge part of her life. A wall is like a stable structure. He was a very prominent part of her life and her internal landscape. My sky. I really do think this increases in intensity. I think when you get to like someone being nature in your mind, that's very significant. Sky is part of nature, and whenever there's nature involved, I take it very seriously. Also, the sky is something very ethereal. It changes colors, sunset, sunrise. Mother Nature has a very beautiful color palette all the time, but especially during those moments. The sky is also where we have sunlight, which is positive. It's also where we have storm clouds, which are not as positive. The lyric video of this song consists of storm clouds. Perhaps at one point he illuminated her sky, but now he's just bringing in dark clouds. And when you make someone your sky, there's of course different ways to interpret this. I'd be interested to know what your take is is on this. Let me know in the comments below. The sky, again, is nature. I think that's very significant because you cannot manufacture nature yourself. It just simply exists. Whenever like a human being is represented as nature, I take that as being very significant and very poignant. Also, the sky is like above you, and wherever you go, like it exists there, so you can't escape from the sky. You look up at the sky, and like when you metaphorically look up at something, whatever is above you has more power. It's like more grand than you are. A lot of times when people pray, they look up. That's where they associate God with being. So it's kind of another way that she's worshiping him. You could argue any way you view it. I would argue that making someone your sky is very significant and very intimate. She really felt very deeply for this person, and she really loved him, like soul level love him. She's not saying that he became her sky. She made him her sky. She really had to allow for this to happen, which I'm sure wasn't easy for her. I feel like she really had to open herself up to him. That's even more heartbreaking because she took a chance and she was vulnerable. Now I'm begging for footnotes in the story of your life.
A footnote, it's defined as a note of reference, explanation, or comment, usually placed below the text on a printed page. So the top example is something you would find within a text, within an article of some sort, maybe within an essay. For example, here it says, make sure to like and subscribe to Summer Sentiment. And then it has that one right there that the arrow is pointing towards. That shows that there's a footnote that goes with this. That statement needs more information for it to make sense. Footnotes are usually at the bottom of the page. Sometimes they're at the end of a book as well, or the end of a chapter. In this example that I randomly made, the footnote is at the bottom of the page. You see the number 1. It corresponds to the statement that had that number 1, and it's going to have the extra information there. Sometimes footnotes include things like definitions or historical context details, etc. They help frame the information better, and they provide you with a context that has more depth.
And what's significant here is that a footnote is used when you need more information. What's in the text is not enough. You need some more information to understand what is being expressed. She does not have enough information from him to know what's going on in his life. Therefore, she needs footnotes. She needs extra references. She needs data. She needs to like go research this. This shows how great of a disconnect there are between these two people in their lives. They're very much like ships passing in the night. They're like parallel. There's no intersection, no perpendicular lines, no 90-degree angles. It's just like parallel vibes. The word begging connotes desperation. It also connotes lack of power. She doesn't have the resources or the references needed to be able to understand him and his life. Drawing hearts in the byline. A byline is like in a newspaper where you see the title and then underneath it says by so-and-so, and then it usually says like staff writer or like associate editor or something underneath. That's the byline. There's different ways to view this. How I'm interpreting this is that, first of all, the byline exists in newspapers and in articles. I don't think you can really associate that with like a book or a novel. And articles give you headlines. They don't give you like an intimate story usually. It's more just like what you need to know. Like, this is the news. This suggests that she needs like the headlines from him because she doesn't know anything. And this also is just like a very formal thing. A byline is a very professional, formal thing. She's trying to add hearts to it to make it an emotional and intimate thing. Illustrates the fact that the way he is towards her, or the dynamic, lends itself to like a professional sort of thing. Like, love letters don't have bylines. When a byline exists, it's either in like a journalism setting or like an academic setting. We have this very like professional sort of vibe with a byline. Metaphorically, you can argue that she's being presented with an article about him and what he's doing, like the update. The connotation of a byline is not something I would associate with a relationship. It's very much like a professional sort of thing. So I think she's really just trying to add emotion and feeling into a situation that is void of emotion.
The fact that it's a byline makes me think that a third party is writing this. She's getting news about her husband from other people, not directly from the source. That creates even more space between her and her spouse, and that would explain even further why she feels the need to draw hearts in the byline, because the whole article that the byline is for, it's all about her spouse, right? But it's so dry, it's so sterile, there's no intimacy, there's no love, there's no emotion, which are things that you would ideally want in a marriage. She's getting an article professionally written and edited because it has a byline, and it's coming from a third party. It's the most ironic thing ever. You have all these details about your spouse, but it's void of any sort of like essence of them. It's a very cut and dry sort of thing. And I think she's still trying. Like, she's the one trying in this relationship. That's how I'm interpreting it. That's why she's drawing hearts. She's just trying to create something of value here. But it seems like she's the only one. And in a relationship, both people have to want it.
Always taking up too much space or time. She just feels like she's a nuisance. I just analyzed a song, Good Days by SZA, and that song SZA talks about feeling like a nuisance. But that's the same sort of dynamic being expressed here. I'll go and link that video down below. Her presence is not valued. She feels annoying. She feels belittled. She feels small. I could go on and on. This is not a dynamic that you would want to stay in. And I understand too, if she's in this marriage and if like he's not doing anything about it, perhaps it's a situation where she has to stay in it. It's just two people that aren't on the same wavelength anymore. It sounds like the husband doesn't care to fix it. It takes two people to like solve a problem like this, right? And I don't think he wants to. You assume I'm fine, but what would you do if I? The word assume is very important because it suggests that no real conversations have been had about this dynamic or the situation. And she probably gives off the air of being fine. She's really like holding it together. But again, like I said earlier, when there's a lot of pressure in a closed container, it can only take so much before the lid pops off and explosion happens, right? But what would you do if I? And then we go to verse 3. Break free and leave us in ruins. Took this dagger in me and removed it. Ooh. Gain the weight of you, then lose it. Believe me, I could do it. If it's all in my head, tell me now. Tell me I've got it wrong somehow. I know my love should be celebrated, but you tolerate it. I think this whole song is an internal monologue. She's at the point of her internal monologue where she's like, you know what? I could leave. I could do it. What would you do if I did this? When it says break free and leave us in ruins, the phrase break free is significant because when you break free of something, it suggests that you were being held back, perhaps even like tied up by something. It's like a freedom of some sort. You know, it's a feeling of entrapment, being a prisoner in your own life, and leave us in ruins. So if she were to leave, the walls of their marriage would just fall. She's aware that if she leaves this relationship, it's gonna leave them in ruins. Ruins could be referring to the relationship. It could also be referring to their reputation. It's kind of just like, if she does leave, it's gonna ruin both of them. And this is why I think it's taking place in a very specific time period or just in a very specific social setting. Some social settings, if you divorce, people don't look at you the same way. You're viewed as damaged goods, especially the women, sometimes also the men. I think that's what that's referring to. It also suggests that this relationship is something that they cannot easily get out of. Again, feeling of entrapment, which is interesting because if they are both kind of suffering, if you're trapped in this relationship, wouldn't you try to at least fix it? Maybe instead of trying to fix it, he is looking outside of the relationship for something. Maybe that's what the indiscretions are referring to. I don't know. It's definitely a possibility. Took this dagger in me and removed it. This is very important. The word dagger is very violent. So there's a dagger in her, which sounds very painful, like being stabbed in the back. For her, since this is in the context of marriage, I feel like someone was coming to hug her and then like stabbed her instead of hugging her. Like someone close to her inflicted this wound on her. If she removes this dagger, she's gonna bleed out. So that's a very violent image. Here she's saying that I don't even care if I hurt myself. I don't care how metaphorically fatal this is gonna be for me. I would do it. Gain the weight of you, then lose it. For me, this line is very interesting. Remember what I said earlier about them just being parallel to one another? There's no like intersections. I think that right now she's feeling the weight of the situation and not of him because they're both living in their own worlds, their own bubbles. But if she were to burst the bubble, both hers and his, their worlds are gonna collide for a second before she leaves him. That's how she's gonna feel the weight of him. There's no more indifference. There's no more like intolerable silence. There's gonna be like intense emotions. That's the weight that she's gonna gain, but then she's gonna lose it because she's gonna walk out of that situation. I think that's what that's referring to. Right now, both of them are metaphorically just holding their breath. Believe me, I could do it. She is not doing it right now, but she's like, you know what, I could. I have the ability to do this. I don't even care about the repercussions. It's like a threat, but it's kind of just like a threat in her own mind because again, I believe this is all going on inside of her head. Even more heartbreaking because she knows how detrimental it could be if she were to speak this out loud. I'm saying that because of the word ruins that she used earlier. If she does this, it's gonna leave them both in ruins. It's going to ruin them. Repetition of, if it's all in my head, tell me now, tell me I've got it wrong somehow. I think deep down, she would prefer to be wrong about this. It would make it easier. There would be less pain. She's definitely desperate for answers and clarity. I don't blame her. To me, it's interesting that she knows her worth. She is tolerating him too, right? Oh my gosh. She is tolerating his tolerance. And then the last line, I sit and watch you. I love this last line. It's kind of haunting because at the end you realize that she's sitting and watching him at the beginning, and while she's watching him, she is thinking all of this, feeling all of these emotions, and it just circles back. Taylor does this a lot. She does a circular type of storytelling where the person is starting a story, and at the end you realize that they were just standing somewhere reminiscing about it. The fact that it ends the way it does brings you back to the present moment. This was all of this intensity, all of these metaphors, all of this like interesting diction was going on in her head while she was silently sitting and watching him. He has no idea she was thinking these things. Look how intense these things are. He has no idea, and she's just watching him. It's very intense. So this song doesn't really have a resolution. Kind of like the song Ivy that I just analyzed. There's no resolution. It's just describing a dynamic. It's like, it is what it is. We don't know if at a later time things are going to change, but this is very much a snapshot of this dynamic in a particular moment in time. I don't think either person is enjoying this marriage, and I really feel for the protagonist because she feels belittled every second of every day. She's not checked out of the relationship, he is, so she's putting an effort and it's just not being reciprocated in any way. I think Taylor really illustrated this beautifully. The heaviness of this dynamic, the kind of hollowness as well. It's just like you're holding your breath the whole time and the air is heavy. That's all I have for this song. Let me know your thoughts down below. I'd be interested to hear your take on this. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you haven't already, if you want. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye!